really don't want you falling asleep on me after lunch. Before we continue our journey, are there any questions about kind of CRS's journey and what we do and how we haven't really gotten how we do it, but really what we do? I know who we are.
I guess you tailor your needs based on the country you're going in.
Yeah, we do.
One is to, you know, worry about the HIV crisis, and the other one was basically childcare.
Correct.
Because you have your own family go on, or childcare.
Right.
I guess you have a force that goes in, or a group.
Yes.
But do you have to be invited in?
Yeah, so that's a very good point. So we do not go into a country unless the bishop invites us.
Okay.
So the bishop of that country, or that diocese, has to invite us in. And then obviously we have to get all the government approvals and all that as well. And the one thing that we do, I think that distinguishes us from other groups, is we will not go in and say, this is what you need. We will go in and ask you, what do you need? What does your community need? If the community members come together, or the parish comes together and they say, we're all growing tomatoes and trying to sell them in the market, and no one's buying our tomatoes. Okay, well, we're going to do an analysis of what isn't being sold in the market. Will it grow in the land that you have, and how do we do it in a sustainable, environmental, safe standard that will beef up your product? So that's the one thing that we are really insistent upon, is that we will not go in and tell you what you need. And we'll get to kind of what that looks like. It's actually called interhuman development, and we'll talk about it. Yeah.
What percentage of your labor force is volunteers and staff, and how does clergy fit in?
We have no volunteers. It is all staff. Clergy fits in a variety of ways. One of our mandates from the U.S. bishops is to engage the Catholic community in the United States around our work. So kind of help raise the awareness among the Catholic community that we all have a gospel call. And that gospel call is to help our brothers and sisters overseas. And how do we do that? And we'll talk a little bit about how we do that this afternoon, but it's getting people involved in, like, CRS Rice Bowl. It's getting people involved in being a voice for those that don't have a voice here in the United States through advocacy. It's helping people understand that by purchasing fair trade coffee, which you drank today, by the way, this is the coffee you've been drinking today, fair trade coffee, right? So farmers are getting a fair wage for it. By purchasing this, you are doing more for a farmer, a coffee farmer, than you would ever be doing by purchasing Folgers. Yes, is it more expensive? Yes. Is it better? Well, yeah. If you say no, I might slap you. As my parents drink Folgers at home. Let's not even get into that. But so it's how can Catholics in the United States take small steps to better the lives of our brothers and sisters overseas? So that's one of our mandates, is to help Catholics understand that. Who best to do that? From the pulpit, from the parish itself.
Pastor.
Clergy, right? So part of what we have to do is actually educate clergy first on the fact that this organization exists. I would guarantee that if you did a poll of clergy in the Diocese of Salt Lake and asked them who Catholic Relief Services is, they would not fully know. They might confuse us with Catholic Community Services. They might know us as the Rice Bowl group. Yeah, the Rice Bowl people. But they would not really know that we work on their behalf and on behalf of Catholics helping the poor overseas. I'm guessing more than half would not know. So our job, my job, this is what I get paid the big bucks for. This is what I get paid to do, let's just say that, is to educate clergy. So how do we educate clergy on their role? How does this enhance their ministry? What is their role as a deacon, as a priest, as a seminarian? How do we integrate Catholic social teaching? And it's not just about CRX, it's actually our gospel call. This is what we're called to. How do we integrate that into the formation of seminarians? Which is a challenge, but we're doing it. How do we integrate it into the formation of the diaconate? And how do we integrate it into the continuing education of all three of those? So that's the role of clergy. Because if clergy understand it, then they're gonna get their parishioners involved.
So I just have an organizational question. So
Sure.
is CRS specifically a US organization?
It is not US at all. We don't work in the United States. We are the international relief and development arm of the Catholic Church. Catholic Community Services, or Catholic Charities, depending on your diocese, is the local arm.
Okay.
So that's the best way to distinguish.
So there are people from CRS not only doing work all over the world, but they live in different parts. of the
Correct. So the majority of our staff, the 5,000 staff that we have overseas, the majority of that staff will come from the country of origin. So if we're working in Lebanon, the majority of our staff will be Lebanese. But we will have international staff that work overseas as well. So we have an emergency response unit or department or whatever division. Most of those folks are international staff and based all around the US, all around the world. The folks that you have in the United States are like Anna and I, who are trying to do outreach to Catholics to get them involved, or who are doing fundraising, or who work in our marketing communications department or fundraising department or HR. Those are the folks that work in the United States. But we don't do relief or any type of work like that in the United States.
Yeah.
That's Catholic Community Services. Anna, and then
I did want to say about that, we are a U.S. organization in the sense that we're an organization of the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops.
right, but we don't.
But we
work in
don't do
United
the
States.
humanitarian work inside, because that's Catholic Community Services or Catholic Charities.
So is there a counterpart, say, in England?
Yes,
Yes.
it's called CAFOD.
Okay.
CAFOD is in England, Trocare is in Ireland,
Australia
Caritas
has one.
Australia would be the equivalent of ours. Caritas Switzerland would be the equivalent of us for
Okay.
Switzerland. So yeah, there are equivalents. And actually, the Muslim community also has an equivalent. I'm forgetting their name right now.
So
And
talking
Canada
about
does too.
hierarchy, is there something at the papal level that oversees all those and coordinates?
That's Caritas International, it's at the international level, and, yeah.
Okay.
So
Thank
that
you.
umbrella that she was
Just need
talking
that
about,
picture.
all those people that I just mentioned fit under that umbrella. And they're in Rome. They're in Trastevere, actually.
Is there a cardinal at the top of all this,
At the top of all,
the structure?
yes, Cardinal
Tagle.
Tagle from the Philippines
All right.
is the president of Caritas Internationalis. Our board member, the president of, or the chairman of our board of CRS is Bishop Mansour. So he's Maronite bishop, actually. Yeah. So, other questions before we hit the road? Okay. So what is our journey guided by? We've talked a lot today about scripture, right? Well, we've talked a lot about scripture because that's who we are as Catholics. And as a Catholic organization, that's what guides our journey. And I think we tend to, at times, forget about the Old Testament. I mean, there is an Old Testament. I'm sure you guys know this. I just found out about it, but there is one. I'm just kidding. But so we have to remember that even in the Old Testament, that the foundation of the social mission, inherent dignity because humans are made in the image of God. Right? This is why we care about everyone. This is why we do what we do. And it goes back to the very beginning of our teachings. Our journey is, if you also look at Micah, the theme of the prophetic writings is a call for repentance from sinful ways, particularly oppressing the poor and the vulnerable. So this is what our journey is guided by. I think it's also, important, God's telling us, especially in Mark, hey, you gotta care for those who are less fortunate. You gotta care for your neighbors, even if your neighbors are 5,000 miles away, right? This is what we are called to do, is to love your neighbor as yourself. There is no other greater commandment. You guys just went out to lunch, right? Did you spend more than $2 on lunch?
Yes.
That coffee that I had, that my sister so nicely brought me, which was good, thing for this afternoon, was more than $2, right? Can you imagine living only on $2 a day? That's what most people live on a day in the countries that we work in. We talked a little bit about kind of water and poverty-related diseases. When your child gets sick or got sick, or your grandchildren, what do? Take them to the doctor, right? If they're sick and they need medicine, doctor gives it to them, right? What if you couldn't get to the doctor because the doctor was 6 hours walking and you had no other way to get there? 30,000 children die per day because of poverty-related issues. This is what our gospel is calling us to do, is to stop that, to care for those 30,000 children. This is what we as Catholics are called to do. We have, CRS has been given a particular mission by the U.S. bishops to serve people in need around the world, whatever their background. So we talked a little bit about that earlier. We do not discriminate against race or creed or nationality. We don't care. That's not what Catholic means. We treat all people with a spirit of love rooted in Christ's message of love. Beatitudes. So I am never going to look at the Beatitudes the same way after reading this quote from Pope Francis. Usually when I'm sitting in church and the Beatitudes come, I'm like, oh dear God, really? This is a really long gospel. Okay, not as long as the Passion, but it's still really long. And now, having looked at this quote, and thinking of the Beatitudes as our identity card, I'm like, oh yeah, now those make sense, right? This is what we are called to do. Pope John Paul II said that this is the belief that, he said that the foundation of the Catholic social teaching rests on human dignity, right? Solidarity, and subsidiarity. This is the foundation of our work. This is what we firmly believe. This is why we don't go in and say, no, this is what you need. I think a really good example of how we lift up this idea of subsidiarity is when the tsunami hit several Christmases ago in Sri Lanka. You know, we were there, we were doing emergency relief. When it came time to build transitional shelters, instead of going in and just putting up transitional shelters everywhere, we pulled the community together and we said, where do you want your door to face? Why is that important? It's important because the community members were Muslim and they needed their door to face Mecca. So it's not us going in and just putting stuff up and saying, no, you have to do it this way. It's, what do you need? Where do you want your door to face? That's, you were asking earlier what distinguishes us from other organizations. That's it. We aren't going in and doing agency. We are going in and lifting up agency.
Say that again in a different way.
We don't go in and do for them. We allow them to do it for themselves. This idea of subsidiarity.
So do you fund them to do it?
We will fund, the way our funding works is we will do trainings for like community members or for, not clergy, but
The workforce?
yeah, but it's more community members and kind of those in the parish that are leaders. Parish leaders is the word I'm looking for. We will do trainings for them and we will fund those trainings. They will then go and take those trainings and what they've learned and go into the community and make it happen. Whatever it is, whether it's, you know, caregiving. So we've trained the caregivers. Now they have to make it right.
So do you have to have a strong parish footprint when you go into a location?
No, we can work with just the community. We usually try and go through the local church because that's our partner of choice. But if there isn't a local church, then we will work through the community that's there. Just depends on the situation itself. Yeah.
So, one of the things that I liked about Catholic Relief Services is they have a low overhead cost.
Yes, we do.
But
My
when you go-
salary will tell you that.
When you go out into these communities and you partner
Yep.
with these people, how are they vetted and how do you ensure that there isn't corruption that occurs on the back end?
Yeah, so we're one of the things that we pride ourselves in is what we call MEAL. And that's our Monitoring, Evaluation, and Accountability Learnings group. And so we have very strict guidelines that are in place on how people have to report back to us. Not to say that doesn't happen, but we are very careful about how we do that. Because our partner of choice is the church, that helps. So we have that accountability there as well, and less likely to be taken advantage of. The way our funding works is most of our funding comes from grants from the US government. So we have to apply for various grants. Now, we also have to be very careful that those grants and those fundings don't go against our Catholic teaching. Because if they do, we can't apply for them, and we won't apply for them. So if we work with other organizations, other what we call NGOs, non-governmental organizations, you know, there are times where we work together with them. And if it's, government funding is very complicated, so I'm going to try and make it very simple. And I always do a really bad job at it. So I'm going to confuse you more, basically. But the way government funding works is that there are various organizations that are applying for various amounts of money for a large grant. So it could be a health grant. And under that health grant, it could be HIV/AIDS prevention, it could be malaria prevention, and it could be education on health under that large umbrella. We may go for the malaria grant along with like a larger organization that's going for the whole thing. They may come to us and say, you do malaria really well. Help us apply for this grant and you take the malaria piece. Well, you will be fine as long as it doesn't go against our Catholic teachings. Now, that same organization could be going for the health grant, HIV/AIDS prevention grant, and that could include distribution of condoms. That's fine. Go right ahead. We don't believe in it. That's your portion of the money. We are focused on malaria. That money is not fungible. That money cannot be intertwined. We cannot take the malaria money and use it for this. It doesn't work that way. And so then we will take that money and we will go into a country and we will do malaria prevention. We will work with the local church. We will work with the local community to make that happen. It is very complicated. We are trying to raise up our non-government money, but that's really hard to do.
What
You guys raise money for churches. You know how hard it is.
What percentage of your funding is from grants?
I will tell you. It's not on here.
2/3 is from US government. And
Is it that
another portion is from other sources of major grants. But I think it's a little less than a quarter, right around a quarter, we're trying to pull more and more from US Catholics.
And
Or
you can
people
check
in the
on our
US of
website and
Goodwill.
I'll tell you more
Yeah.
specifically. It changes all the time, so I'm never good with, I failed math. I went to Catholic school. I failed. Yes.
I was wondering if you ever run into a problem where you go into some sort of village and what they think they need is not really what they need, but you see that they need this, but they don't know what they don't know.
Sure.
And so how do you,
We
or do
educate them.
you try to
Yep.
switch their mind over?
We don't try and switch their minds, we'll try and educate them and say, yes, we can see this is a problem, but you also have this problem and we can help you better with this problem of XYZ. So let's take the malaria example for an example. The malaria, whatever. I clearly need more coffee. If we see that there's really bad, that villagers are dying because of malaria, and we want to do a malaria prevention program, but they really want us to do an agriculture program because they're all growing tomatoes. We may say, let's start with the malaria first because that's how you're going to not die. And then, we can begin to integrate from that malaria project, let's integrate how to build a sustainable livelihood. So let's take that first and then we'll talk about how to
Do they pretty much
diversify.
listen to you or do
They
they
do.
get angry about it?
No, they do. Because they know we're trying to do what's best for them.
Mhm.
And again, we're working with the local community, and so the local community understands what we're trying to do. So, yes, they do. So it's not just our Bible and popes that are telling it, or our Bible that is telling us this, but our popes are telling us as well. St. John Paul II is telling us that you have to care for others. Anna mentioned Deus Caritas Est earlier. He's basically telling us, charity folks, you have to care for those who are less fortunate. And God love my family. Many of them will say, that's great, but what about the people in our own backyard? Yeah, But guess what? It's not either or. It's both and. You have to do both. This is what we're called to do. You can't just say, well, I don't know those people. I can't see those people, so I'm not going to care for them. Wrong. That is not what we're called to do as Catholics. And even as Christians, forget Catholics, we're just not what we're called to do as Christians. We have to work with the local poor, and we have to work with the poor overseas as well. It's the local, we always, the way I explain it to seminarians is local and global. You have to do both, right? And this is what our popes are telling us. Pope Francis says, you know, Christianity is meant above all to put into practice. You were asking, how does this involve clergy? Clergy have to help us put it into practice. They have to show us by example, which is what we are trying to do. And we are taking what we are told in our church's teachings and putting it into practice as an agency. What he's asking us to do is what CRS is doing on your behalf. That doesn't give you a get out of jail free card though. I know, dang it, thought I was free, thought I was home free. No, it actually means you have to work harder because you have to help us. We can't do it without you.
Do you, during the year, do you get one Sunday to solicit for donations at the pulpit?
We do. It is during Lent, and it is the Catholic Relief Services collection.
So it's once a year?
It is once a year, and it's part of a larger, we're not the only recipients, there's 6 other organizations that are recipients of it. We get a good majority of it, but yeah, it's once a year.
And Catholic Community Services has something similar?
Correct. Most organizations do within the church. Most dioceses, a lot of dioceses will have mission offices and mission appeals Sunday, where they do one appeal on a Sunday or multiple Sundays, and it comes under that. Just depends how the diocese works. But CRS has 1 year, it's the 4th Sunday of Lent, and and some dioceses don't do it then. Some do it, they're like, no, we're not going to do it during Lent, we're going to do it some other time. But it's the Catholic Relief Services collection. So this is the basis of why we do what we do. The Eucharist commits us to the poor. This is why we do what we do. This is what our journey is guided by. This is what we are, as Catholics, are told to do. So how does that fit into an approach? So, you've seen where we work and how we work. You know what our journey is guided by. We want to take you on the approach journey. This thing called integral human development. It is actually not an NGO term. Integral human development comes from the Catholic Church. This is where it comes from. Anyone know what PP1 is? PP. My Latin's really bad, so this is a test. Anna, go for it. You know what it is. Do you not know what it is?
PP1 is new to me.
PP?
Populorum Progressive?
Yes!
Okay, yeah, and that's
Don't worry about the one.
okay,
So it's an encyclical.
yeah.
And the encyclical is talking about integral human development. Right? I'm not going to read it to you. You all are very capable of reading. But
I think this is from Paul VI, am I right?
Yes, it is. It is. Paul VI wrote that encyclical. And it's integral human development, RIHD, is the emphasis on the vulnerable and marginalized people. So this is not something CRS made up. I'm getting so excited I'm throwing things. This is not something that CRS made up. This is a framework from the Catholic Church that we adapted to our work. So you can see how our journey is so guided by the church and the teachings of the church. This is why earlier I said we're not some random liberal organization over here doing our own thing. Everything we do is guided by the church's teachings. So this is just kind of a summary. I mean, I could spend probably a good day on integral human development. You all would get bored and I would get bored. So we want to just spend a couple minutes looking at the key features because it gives you a sense of how our approach is so guided by the church's teachings. So it's not just about economic development, but it's integral development of the whole person. What do we mean by that? I'm going to show you what we mean by that. We mean the spiritual and the human. We mean the social aspects of an individual. We mean the political aspects of an individual or community or group. Their financial aspects. So we're looking at everything. All of this is looking at one individual or one community. So it's the whole person, right? It's not just pieces of it. Solidarity is another key feature. And it's looking at every person, the rights and responsibilities of every person. We all have rights and responsibilities, right? Do you think just because Moesha is from Syria and lives in Lebanon, she doesn't have rights and responsibilities? She certainly does, right? Those little children in Ethiopia who are dying because of bad water, do they not have rights and responsibilities? So this is this idea of solidarity and what that looks like. Justice and peace. It's highlighting three more principles. So respects the human dignity of every person, the sacredness of life. Anna mentioned this earlier. The sacredness of life from the womb to the tomb and everything in between. So it's not just focusing on the right to live, the right to be born. That's extremely important. We all know that. But what happens in between all of that? I think we tend to forget about that, right? We tend to forget about the sacredness of human dignity actually means the right to be fed. It means the right to go to school. The right to have a family. That's what this means. And then the integrity of creation.
Does CRS have anything to do with the refugee camps?
Yes, we have a lot to do with that. We do, I mean, depending on where we are doing quite a bit with refugees. Yeah, and we're going to actually talk about that. You guys are going to have an exercise on that in just a little bit. And we're going to talk about what does the church say about migration. So in 3 weeks, 2.5 weeks, 2.5 weeks, I will be traveling to Uganda, where we will visit one of the world's largest refugee camp called Bidi Bidi. And it's a refugee camp for South Sudanese who are fleeing violence. So yeah, we do a lot of work with refugees.
Have you been there before?
I have not. I have not. I think the thing I'm most nervous about is flying on a very tiny little airplane. So somebody who travels for a living and does not like to fly is probably in the wrong profession. But we can talk about that later. We can psychoanalyze that later. This is kind of the approach of the integral human development model. So we're looking at assets, we're looking at the systems and the structures. So, what is the government? How is the government working? How is the village working? How is the parish working? Who has influence and access? Do the community members we're working with, is the chief involved, if there is one? Is the pastor involved? So what does that look like? What are the risks and vulnerabilities? Is there going to be drought? Are they going to get floods? Is there going to be earthquakes? What are those? Then we begin to develop strategies. So how do we take all of this that we know and develop a strategy for a sustainable whatever we're working on? And then looking at outcomes and feedback. So now that this project is done, now that we've told everyone you can't plant tomatoes, you plant tomatoes, you plant onions, and you plant garlic. How did that work out? And what is the feedback from the community? So this is kind of our approach, and it just keeps going around and around and around. And we talked about this a little bit already. So I think it's important to this is the most simple way to explain integral human development, at least in my idea. It does not say, here's the solution. We've talked about that already, right? It does not say, here's money, fix your problems. And it does not say, here's the best way to do this. It does ask, what do you need? What goals does your community have? What strengths do you bring to the table? The best example I have of this, we were in Madagascar with a group, and we came upon, by accident, this Food for Work program. And the work was, they were downgrading a road. The road was like this, which was very difficult to get donkeys up and carts up. So the workers were chiseling away at the road at a rocky, rocky road is basically what it was. Not the ice cream, but the road itself. And they were chiseling away at it to downgrade it. So we came up upon it and we were watching them, and their chisel or their tool was a wooden handle with a spade taped to the bottom of it, right? So it's hard work. So the men are chiseling away at this. The women and the children are going and picking up the big boulders and moving them to the side. So one of the seminarians that was with us said, why don't we just get a backhoe in here and do this for them? Or at least have them do it. Just get a backhoe in here. They'd have it done in a day or two. And I said, okay, yep, we can certainly do that. But here are my questions to you. Who teaches them how to run the backhoe? Okay, so maybe we do a training on that, they get that. What happens when the backhoe breaks? How do they fix it? Where do they get the parts for the backhoe? And most importantly, if this job is done in 2 days, how do they get food for the rest of the 6 months of this project? Remember, it's a food for work project. Every day they show up to work for that entire, if they show up every day for a week, they get a vat of oil or a bag of rice. Do you know how long that will feed a family? Months. So we take that away in 2 days. How are these people going to eat? It's not going in and fixing it for them, right? It's having them do it for themselves. Again, what principle is that? Nope, subsidiarity.
So I'm a little confused on that. There's a line item for this budget for this project to fix this road. And if you can fix the road for 5% of the line item, you just get to use the 95% for other projects that are similar.
But it's not,
Here's the best.
yeah, it's not even that. It's not doing for them. It's giving them the dignity that they can do it for themselves.
I know, but
Better to teach someone how to fish than to give them a fish.
Exactly. Exactly. Exactly.
I
Yeah,
will say, yeah, I think it's that project by project things are arranged. Like if you need to drill what's called a borehole to get to a real deep well,
Right.
we do bring in the big equipment.
Yeah.
Sure.
But on the other hand, it's like often what it's best is for various reasons, is to use the local goods.
Mhm.
And
Because you're putting money back into the
so
economy.
sometimes you bring something in from the outside, but to the extent possible, you use local goods. Another example of this that I think is exceedingly important and striking is the earthquake in Haiti.
Hmm.
Very few Americans understood. It was like, why haven't you got this fixed, in 2 months? And it's like, okay, the earthquake made the country rubble. You cannot land the equipment
Right.
even. We had handheld crushers that you literally turn a wheel with both hands to crush the rubble in order to make the stuff to make the concrete. So sometimes you need to use instruments. In that case, it's pretty clear. You need to use an instrument that we never even think of here.
So then you brought everything in through deep water ports? You probably only had one, right? In
I'm
Haiti?
sorry?
Yeah.
The water
We
ports?
didn't
Yeah.
bring anything in.
Yeah,
Because we just had we just used what they had. And we
Right
also,
there.
we had
Yeah.
emergency supplies in,
Dominican Republic.
yeah, Dominican Republic, so we were just able to move stuff, like emergency supplies through there, but that's the whole point, is you can't necessarily, it's gonna cost us more to bring stuff in, and then you're not gonna lift up the local economy. So when people say, well, I'm gonna send all my clothes, and I'm gonna send all my teddy bears to Haiti, the sentiment is great, but then you're taking away from the local economy, if there is able to be one. So when, after an emergency happens, you want to build back up the local economy as fast as you can build it back up, right? So people can get jobs, and so markets can open up and they can feed their families. You don't want to necessarily just go in and say, here's all the stuff you need, because then that doesn't build up the local economy. And it doesn't help them do for themselves. That's the whole point. Is we're not going in and saying, here's the solution, we're going to do it for you.
Isn't that what the Red Cross does though? Don't they, unlike the LDS church, don't they just deliver like your stuff? So,
And sometimes after an emergency, sometimes it's needed, very much so. But if you can get it from the local economy, that's the best way to do it. If you can't, then yes, you need to bring it in. Like the likelihood of the local economy having tarps, it's gonna be pretty small. You know, and you need tarps in order to have a shelter until you can build a house. So there's a balance there. There's a balance there.
Yeah,
And actually, the LDS Church loves us because we can do what they can't do. Because we're in these countries a lot longer than they are. So we work very closely with the LDS Church.
Did you elaborate on that part? Why are you there longer than they are?
Because we've been in these countries for years.
So you have an established
We have an
presence.
established presence in over 100 countries. We've been in Ethiopia for 60-some years. We've been in Haiti for 50-some.
So you're a trusted agent.
We are a trusted agent, Yep.
Right.
very much so. The governments trust us. The church trusts us. We're established. We know what we're doing, and they know that. So I'm not going to spend time showing you this other video on integral human development because it's a bit long, and I do want to get to having you guys do some stuff. Any more questions before we move on to your journey? All right.
Okay, just one question.
Yeah.
Has there ever been thoughts or talks about making it not so much 100% staff-driven?
Say more about that.
Well, the LDS Church here sends all their young missionaries out for 2 years to do this work, and it seems like the Catholic Church has nothing like this, but this, it just screams that if we had a volunteer program where our young men and young women could go participate in helping out the world where it's needed, it just seems like right now it's 100% staff-driven.
It is, because our work is very technical.
Can I offer
Yeah.
a simile
Yeah.
to that? It's like having trained clergy versus a lay bishop, right? Like the lay bishops of the Mormon Church aren't necessarily trained in anything.
also, I think the big deal is we activate the folks that we
The
are
local.
there
Yep.
with. It's their country. And so we only send in experts, which is why we don't have a volunteer program regarding the work overseas.
Right.
We only send in the experts and resources that they don't have upon need. And the whole thing is activate from within.
The work that our staff does is extremely technical. So we are providing technical expertise in how to find and
How to
build
activate
a
them.
borehole. So how do you find water? Volunteers are not going to know the best way to build a well unless they have that background. In our health, most of the work in our health, most of the staff that we have are doctors or nurses. So our work is very, very technical because we're providing the technical expertise for the community itself. There are organizations that do exactly what you're talking about within the Catholic Church. Jesuit Volunteer Services is one. Maryknoll has a lay missionaries group that also sends young people overseas to do volunteer work. We tried it. We're just too technical. Our work is just too technical. And it's lifting up the local, again, it's lifting up the local community as well.
If I could add one more thing about the structure of the church that I failed to say previously, it's that within most of the countries in the Catholic Church, if you go into, one of the I'm going to use the term third world countries, the social mission of the church is the biggest portion of that diocese's infrastructure. You can't say that here in the U.S. Why? Because there it's a matter of life and death. Here it's not. And so they get it. And the way we work with them, therefore, is we work with them through their piece that's set up already. And that, I think, is key, is that in terms of the structure of the church that I was talking about, I failed to say it's a huge arm of the church anywhere else. Just not in the developed countries, because we don't need it
Yeah.
as much, or we think we don't need it as much.
Other questions?
So what, you said you're going to Ethiopia,
Uganda.
Uganda?
Yep.
So what do you yourself do?
Yep.
Like-
So I am taking a group of 8 clergy, priests and deacons, and we will visit the programming that CRS has there. We will listen to the stories. so that they can come back and share that with not only their parishioners, but different parishes throughout the United States. So part of what our clergy do is they preach about CRS, for the lack of better terminology right now. They preach about CRS in their own parishes and in parishes throughout the United States. And no, it's not a second collection. It's literally thanking them for their work, for being supportive of CRS. This is what your money goes to. And by the way, if you don't know who we are, this is who we are. So in order for them to do that effectively, we need to take them and show them the work that we're doing.
So you're like the tour guide.
I am a glorified travel agent, yep, pretty much.
Thanks, baby.
Yeah.
Hey.
I can go home now.
Yeah, so you were talking about clergy. So how do you get to know the program? Do you have conferences that you do like once a year for the diocese, and you or one of the staff come and educate the clergy?
Yeah.
Or how does it work?
So we do it in a couple of ways. We do something like we're doing here for deacons. We do it for priests.
But it's not mandatory for them to go. It's optional.
It depends. So if we're doing a convocation, then technically clergy have to show up to that. You guys have to show up to this class, right? I'm assuming you have to show up to this class, or that you really just want to be here. So it's a little bit of both. We will also, if a diocese says, could you come and do a presentation to our deacons or our clergy, and it's optional for them, then we do that as well. So we do both, a little bit of both. So we'll do various convocations, presentations, reflection days.
But it's up to the diocese.
Yes, it is up to the diocese, correct, correct, yes. It is up to the diocese. I also do a lot of trainings and formation work too, just in case you wanted to know. Oh, hi. It's okay. My self-esteem just went down just a little bit. Just kidding. All right, so I have some questions for you to ponder. Given what you've heard today about the social mission of the church, what is taking place in your parish or your community related to the social mission of the church? We're just going to throw these out there. I want to know what's going on. Yeah.
So the Catholic Community Services helps settle refugees in country.
Okay. Catch.
Good boy.
Okay, I wasn't.
You're a good boy.
Nice to What else? What else is happening?
This time of year, they have like the gift of a drummer, the Jesse tree.
Okay. And say more about those. What are those?
Provide gifts to low-income families.
Families, okay. So kind of like Toys for Tot, but or Adopt a Family, something like that? Okay. What else?
During Lent, we definitely have the rice bowl.
Okay.
Yay!
There you go. There you go. I should give you 2 for that.
Yeah.
What else?
CRS.
What else? What else is happening in your parish? Yeah.
Well, not the parish.
Okay. Good. Can you say more? Go ahead.
Catholic Community Services also has a program in northern Utah where children go hungry during weekends.
Okay.
So they give them food on Friday to last through the weekend and also through holidays when they don't get fed also.
Okay. Yeah, he's good at this catching thing.
St.
Do you do the same
Vincent's-
with tennis balls? I'm just kidding.
St. Vincent's has a food pantry.
Food pantry, okay. What else? Those who haven't spoken, and I'll come back to you.
Well, no, Maria, I'll give you one. When you had your women's retreat, you had Jean Hill come and she sold those products.
Oh, yeah, that's
right, that's right. At the trade
At the trade
services.
sale? I should give you 2 for that.
Good job, Maria. Give me that.
Mindy's hoarding the chocolates.
All right.
It's close to mine.
Do you guys know what the cathedral does?
There's the Good Samaritan program. We give meals to people every day.
Okay.
And also coats for kids.
Oh, yeah, you failed. Okay. What about you guys? What
We
is
handle
your
packages all day long.
Our parish, the one I can think of, but St. Vincent's is doing it too, and that's to feed, put meals together for the holidays for certain families.
Okay. Ready?
Sure.
Okay. Anything globally. So everything you mentioned besides ethical trade and rice bowl is all local, which we've established is a good thing. What about the global dimension?
I think we support a sister church.
Sister church, do you know where?
In some other country, I think it's in Central America.
Okay. I suppose that deserves.
Oh, that's a low throw.
It was low, I don't know. My arm's getting tired.
Our kids go to Juan Diego and they do like dress down days, like, spirit dress. You
Uh-huh.
have to bring $3 or $5, but they often send that money to,
Overseas.
I don't know if it goes to CRS or.
You need to change that.
Okay. It's where it needs to. I don't know where it goes,
But it's still thinking
it is
about
for
the,
something
okay.
global.
okay. Yeah.
So they say.
Yeah.
Sponsoring, I think it's Children and Aging, I don't know, they changed their name, something with a U now.
Resound, rebound,
Unbound,
unbound.
Unbound.
yeah. So you sponsor a child, so much per month, and
Okay.
educate them.
Okay. Okay. How do you want to enhance it? Do you want to enhance it?
Yes.
Just maybe you feel good for 1 minute.
Absolutely.
Okay, good job. You get chocolate for that. Yeah.
I think the problem what you're alluding to is that because we're a developed country and most of these needs are overseas, it's not on our radar.
Right. How are you going to change that?
You can't see it.
Well, let's,
Right. Right.
That's why you take a priest and clergy.
Right.
I mean, I do think the average parishioner thinks that when he gives his weekly money or monthly money to the parish, that some of it goes to the poor overseas, just because that's a good thing. But that's not exactly the
Yeah, that's not
structure.
exactly how it works. I wish it was, but yeah.
Well, what I can think of, our parish is probably not too wealthy, but Father Dennis, one time, he'd done some time in Africa, and he brought these ebony hand-carved nativity sets. I had to buy one, they were absolutely stunning, they're in the front of my dinner table, and it went to, they were only, to me, they were only $50, and I'm sure what it did to the family who, the man
Made
who
that.
ordered them, yeah.
Yeah. Somebody else.
I was just gonna say, I think, like, hearing those stories, it's so foreign to us,
Mm-hmm.
like $2 a day,
Mm-hmm.
like, what?
Right.
Like, that's, it's just too foreign.
Right.
So,
But try, so here's my challenge to you is, yes, it's very foreign, but try not getting your Starbucks coffee every day and see how difficult it is, right? Or whatever, if you don't drink Starbucks coffee, whatever.
So we have a mission priest that we're in contact with, we see him yearly when he comes here. And he's in Malawi, and he's at like St. Pius Parish. But he, it's humbling. We read the emails that we get from him and, it's joyful. And then, of course, he works in there this has been a hard year, please pray for our parishioners. Most have been starving or most have been experiencing severe hunger or something,
Yeah.
And he doesn't ask, but of course we'll say, we'll help or give. And so, it's always on my mind. It's like, how in the world can you get money to the diocese or?
Yeah.
I'm like, well, my ignorance, the first time I met him, it was like, well, how in the world, why doesn't the diocese help you? And he said, no. He said, I'm lucky, so we eat the masa, every meal. And he said, and I'm very lucky when bringing the gifts, if a parishioner brings like a fruit or a vegetable, he said, then that's for us for the week.
It is. So the most amazing thing I ever saw related to that was, where was I recently? It was in Kenya. We were at Mass on a Sunday. And all of a sudden you see the parishioners with the gifts. So they're bringing up the gifts at communion time. With the gifts, they're bringing up toilet paper. They're bringing up fruit. They're bringing up bags of rice, vats of oil. And I turned to our colleague. I figured out what it was, but I wanted to check. I turned to my colleague. I'm like, what is that for? And she said, it's for the priest, for them to live. Because the diocese they don't have any money, right?
That was unfathomable.
Right.
I had no idea.
Right. So, and I think everything we're talking about is that idea of charity. Have you guys ever heard of the 2 feet of justice? Or the 2 feet, so you've got justice and you've got charity. And it's how do you do both? How do you walk with both instead of just one? And we tend, because it's what we know and it's easy for us to focus on the charity piece, right? It's giving the money, it's putting money in the rice bowl, but how do you also look at the justice piece? How do you have both feet moving at the same time? And that's kind of what we want to challenge you to today is not just looking at the local, but how do we educate ourselves around the global? What does that look like? And then how can we be a resource? Because guess what? If you use us as a resource, it's free. Everything I'm about to share with you today is free. I know we all like free. Okay, I like free. I'm just gonna put it out there. Anything that's free, I'm like, okay, what is it? Right? So it's not going to cost your parish to do any of this, but it's raising that awareness of what our gospel call is. So, I keep turning this off so I don't hit it. CRS Rice Bowl, how many of you do it in your parish? Okay? Tell me how. Give me a sense of what you do with the rice bowls.
Set them out the first Sunday of Lent.
Okay.
Collect them after Easter.
That's it. Okay, what else?
We've taken the little paper that comes with it and
The
made
calendar.
of the meals.
Okay, oh, the recipes.
Yeah.
Great. Just as a family or as a parent? As a family?
Yeah,
Okay.
sorry.
No, that's fine.
Family.
No, that's fine. What else? How else have you used it? If you all use it, you gotta know how your parish is doing it, right? How's your parish doing it? Just setting them?
Kids in CCD and then they turn them in, that's as far as what I
As you know?
got to see.
Okay, that's fair. So it's just CCD kids, not necessarily the whole parish?
That's the push in our parish.
Okay.
I don't think there's a big push.
Well, ours is just a basket at the front, and
It's there,
then once in a while,
very
somebody will set at the
specific,
table.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
for you to take on your way out. The priest mentions it.
Okay, well, that's a start, eh?
Yeah.
That's not bad. How, do you guys know how your parish does it?
What do you mean, how do they do it?
So,
Like they attach it to the bulletin
No,
of
yeah,
that week and they send them
Sure.
home to each family?
Sure.
And they say, please don't bring back the bowl, just write a check for the money.
okay, that works too.
That's how we do it.
That's a
That's
good
good.
idea.
Do you know how horrible those are to count, by the way? Being, working in a parish for 8 years. Those are horrible. There's no banks will just take change anymore. You have to wrap it.
Yeah.
So, okay,
Doesn't want to.
Really?
So that's an awesome idea.
American first, just saying.
yeah, so, and I guess the other thing, there's a wealth of educational resources with the Rice Bowl, right? There's the recipes. There are
Sure.
Stations of the Cross. Did you all know that? Stations
No,
of the Cross?
tell me about that.
Stations of the Cross. So let me, I can't do that here. I was gonna pull up the website, but that might screw things up, so we won't do that. On the website, they will have Stations of the Cross that are related to stories of the countries that are highlighted for that year. So you will go through Stations of the Cross, but highlighted in that are stories of people, of beneficiaries that your money that through Rice Bowl goes to help.
Is this a online thing?
You can print it. And so there's one version that's printable and then there's one that's actually a video. Is that correct? Do you remember, Anna?
We have both available.
Yeah, so there's a video that you can just play.
So it's 14 stories?
Yeah. Yeah.
To be recited at each station.
Yeah.
And the prayers, I mean, it's not just the
Yeah.
stories, there's
prayers
prayers
with it.
connected with, that connects the station with the realities that you're reflecting on.
So I'm actually not texting my text messages from my husband. I am looking up the website, although I did get one. I actually got a picture of the dog. I'm just looking up the website so I can show you a little bit more.
Yeah.
Did you know
I was
there's an
gonna say,
app?
if they have
How many of you have high schoolers, college age kids? Not asking your ages or anything, but yeah, right? So are they always on this device? Did you know there's an, so yeah, well, how I wasn't gonna ask about your spouse, I was gonna keep the peace. I was gonna keep the peace. But did you know that there's an app that you can download? And what that app does is it gives you a reminder. At any time, you can set a reminder like, oh, pray. Like, I never think to stop and pray at noon. So I can have my phone ding me and I'll say a prayer. You can, instead of putting money in that rice bowl thing that y'all hate to count, you can, like if you decide not to go to Starbucks, you can put that money you would spend at Starbucks in the app. It's all right there.
Isn't it true that St. Faustina liked the app?
What?
The inside joke I have.
Did it start Divine Mercy?
It started as the Divine
Alright.
Act, but it didn't go over very big, so it's with Divine Mercy.
for it,
So-
Mercy, yeah.
Love you, Craig.
There are, I can tell you guys are like hitting the end of your day. There are tons of resources with Rice Bowl that are free. You can, if CCD kids are doing it, there's a whole lesson plan related to it. So as future deacons and deacons' wives, we want to encourage you to enhance, Rice Bowl's coming. Lent's coming.
Is that what it?
Yes.
No.
Wait, what?
What is that?
That's not us.
Oh my God, sorry.
If you
CRSRicebowl.org.
Yeah.
Try CRSRicebowl.org.
Do not donate to that one.
Yeah, do not give money to that. I was like, wait, what?
Yeah, you're like if you.
There are tons of ways to enhance Rice Bowl where it's not just about the money, but it's about a Lenten experience. It's about a Lenten journey. Yes, that's the correct website. One of the things one of my clergy does is he, in his narthex, because we're visual learners, right? Most of us tend to prefer to look at pretty things, like that's why I have a bunch of pictures, because you would prefer to look at that than me and a bunch of text. He takes the pictures from the website of the stories. So if they're featuring a certain person, he'll take that picture of the person with the little blurb, blow it up, and put them in his narthex every week, right? It's bringing that awareness that this isn't just about the little coins in the rice bowl, it's more than that. So one of the things we want to challenge you guys to this year, because Lent is around the corner, and I know you have limitations, you're just in formation, and pastors have their rules, and yada, 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 I get that. Do you think I can get my dad to do it? I'm working on it. But it's to begin to talk to your folks about how can we take this the next step. So instead of just attaching it to the bulletin and saying, don't bring a bag full of change, just write a check. Okay, that's fine, but how do we do more? Maybe the priest is willing to use the prayers of the faithful one Sunday or a couple of Sundays throughout. Maybe if you're in charge of stations for the parish, you can sneak those in somehow. Or maybe not sneak them in, but prayerfully consider using them. Sneak them in. You know.
You want to change hearts.
I do. I want people to understand that we have a responsibility for our brothers and sisters overseas. Because when that next emergency happens, I don't want them to think about Red Cross. I want them to think what their organization is doing on their behalf.
And you know, I think, like when that tsunami happened.
Yeah.
I think the first place I gave was the CRS.
You just want chocolate.
No, I'm being serious. Because of the fact that I understand that.
But a lot of people don't even know who we are,
Yeah.
right? So your job is to educate them. Educate them through rice bowls.
Well, and the beauty of this, you know, this brings up, you know, I teach some classes, I facilitate some classes at Notre Dame on introductory to Catholicism.
Notre Dame University?
Yeah.
They're playing Clemson, by the way. We won't talk about that.
But you know what? We get to the social justice piece in that class.
Yeah.
And I'm telling them the most effective way, you know, we're taught that we need to help our neighbor, and yeah, I'm going to invite a homeless person into my house. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You meaning, but there's a way. We've got the structures in place to actually participate. You know, we participate by giving our dollars to these, and it's like I'm there. I've got some meat in the game, so to say.
Yeah.
Why is it your responsibility to get the word out? Why isn't it the bishops and the cardinals and the Vatican?
It is, they're trying.
Uh,
But they've got multiple other things on their plates right now. Yeah.
So
Well, and
you're
again,
competing
the
with other
structure.
interests.
Yeah, and it's also the structure of the church.
The hierarchy comes down.
Yeah.
We are part, you know, you guys literally will be part of the hierarchy, and anybody working in lay leadership, we're all part of that hierarchy that takes on the responsibility. Because how else can the word actually penetrate?
Yeah, and the reality of it is, if you ask some of our bishops, they own us, some of them might not know who we are.
That's the point I'm
Yeah.
trying to make.
And we are trying to educate them as well. So we're not just trying to educate you and Catholics, we're trying to educate the clergy. Like, when I mean clergy, I mean all clergy.
I know,
from
but
bishops on down.
your budget this year, how's it